Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We're here with Robert Ingalls, and he is the founder of LawPods, which is one of the first podcast production agencies for law firms. Robert and his team help some of the premier law firms in the world launch and grow branded podcasts that build relationships and drive revenue. So there's going to be so much to talk about, from niching down to saving time, saving your audience's time, podcasting in general, and so on. So, Robert, glad to be speaking with you.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I watched a little bit of your social media, a little bit of the reels right before getting on here, and I was really impressed. And I love this idea because there's something, I don't know, feels kind of weird when you're podcasting about podcasting. It seems kind of like meta, or like it gets really kind of vague and intangible. But then what you've done is kind of really niching down and focusing specifically on podcasts for law firms. I think that's an amazing idea. It's one of those combinations of, like, it's simple, but it's also outside the box. So tell us about it.
Yeah, it was my whole journey here started with being a lawyer who was overwhelmed and anxious. And I really didn't have this understanding that you could do something else. You know, when you spend this much time and this much money doing something, like, this is what you do. And so I thought I just had to figure it out. I had to figure out how to make my square peg go in that round hole. And during this overwhelm and trying to figure things out, I discovered podcasts. And within a month of listening to my first one, I bought this mic and $1,000 worth of gear and set up in my spare bedroom and started playing around. And I was just taken by the medium, by how you could relate to somebody on such a deep level with something you recorded, a year ago, 5 years ago, and just had a conversation, and you made it available, and now it's out there, and I can sit and listen and get all this immense value from it. And I just thought, I want to be a part of this. I have something to say. Now, that I had zero idea that it would land me here in this chair doing this for other people, because I just didn't see that as something I could do. That's something that other people do who have a different background than me. Because I went to school for criminal justice and then law, and then I started my career as a criminal defense attorney. And this idea that anybody can just do anything they want was just very foreign to me. And so it took a couple of years of being a hobbyist, and then I started one in my law firm before I allowed myself to believe this is something that you can do. But one of the reasons I niched here was I learned in law that the riches are in the niches. The attorneys that did well were most of the ones that I was able to see, and still do now to this day, were the ones that found something that they were very good at. Perhaps they were uniquely qualified to be good at it, and they served a specific kind of person. And that allowed them to do a few things. To learn how to do something really, really well. One thing, they didn't do anybody who showed up at their office, they didn't serve them, because then you have to learn how to do whatever their problem is, whether it's a divorce or an estate plan or personal injury. They had to learn how to do each of those things, and they're all immensely complicated. And so by learning to do one thing and do it really well, it allowed them to go up and really become an expert in that subject matter. But it also makes marketing infinitely easier, because this is who I am, and this is who I do it for. It's what I do, who I do it for. And so I took that lesson into building a business. And because I am uniquely qualified to work with lawyers, having been a lawyer, I speak that language. It gets me in the conversation, maybe sometimes in the beginning when it shouldn't have. And I'm also the person who does it for lawyers. I'm not just Rob's podcast. Who wants a podcast? Rob will make your podcast. That's a hard one. And I see a lot of companies doing it, and some have been reasonably successful with it, but it's a heavy lift to just be out there doing it for everybody. And I've grown so much faster. I work for, top 5 law firms in the world. And I started with my first client just by happenstance 6 years ago this month. And a little over 2 years later, I had my first national firm. And then a little more than a year after that, I'm getting bigger firms. And I know that I'm not in those conversations if I'm Rob's podcast. It's because I committed to this field and people started to get to know me. They were having conversations, they were making referrals. And so that's you just learned a little bit about me because that's the short story.
Okay. And I got a lot of your sort of passion and getting a little bit into your mindset and your problem solving. You're saying that it's really important to niche down. That way, I mean, it has like 7.5 different benefits, right? Like you niche down, you specialize more, you have better focus, your knowledge is more compacted. You don't have to know a little bit about a lot. You can really help people better. You get known a lot better for what it is that you do. And then it seems like the content and the networking and the connections seem to flow better, right? Like if you have this sort of self-discovery, self-awareness about who and what you are and exactly the problems that you solve, it seems like it's just once you're on this path of increasing your confidence, of being more targeted, of podcasting, of communicating, it just seems like there's all these benefits. And so when you help out these law firms, these lawyers to get into podcasting, like what stops them? Like, first of all, like why aren't they already podcasting when you come across them? And then what sort of like hesitation or excuses do they feed you as far as why they think they can't do it?
Lawyers, just by their nature, are a little guarded. They are behind when it comes to marketing, and they just really want this to be a bright, shiny object. They want it to go away, and they're hoping that it will. And they've also been burned a lot. And I think that makes them a little more reserved, a little bit more withdrawn, because marketing is one of those areas where there's not a barrier to entry. You know, with law, you're not allowed to practice law, at least in the United States, unless the governing body of law has, given you that license and said, hey, you've passed our requirements, you can do this. But with marketing, there are no such laws, which I also think is the lovely part about it, because anybody who has a natural proclivity for it, who's willing to learn, can do it. But that also is a double-edged sword, because then anybody can show up and start doing it. And lawyers are an area that gets preyed upon a lot because law firms have to market, and they are looking for new and unique ways to do it. And they have money. They tend to be an area that has a little bit of cash, and they know they need to spend it. And so there's a lot of unscrupulous, maybe I should say snake oil salesmen out there that are promising the world, promising front page of Google, and then delivering nothing, getting these people into year-long contracts and just delivering nothing. And so when somebody like me shows up and they say, you know what you should also be doing while you're writing your blogs, while you're doing SEO, while you're making social media content, you should also be podcasting. And they're like, God damn it, I don't want to do another thing. I want you to be wrong about this. And so I encountered that a lot, especially in the beginning when I first started. Man, it was I couldn't give this stuff away. And it was a real slog in the beginning to get those first handful of clients to really establish myself. And I was willing to basically give it away in the beginning just to learn what I didn't know, but also be able to say, look who I work for. Here's something I've created. This is what I can do for you. And getting those first few clients was hard. It was almost exclusively people who were tech focused. They were interested in new things. They wanted to do the cutting edge thing. But then it was, I found myself in a really fun and unique place of doing something I really like doing at the moment that it was also on the upswing. It was coming up. Articles were getting written about it. More people were starting to do it. People were starting to see results from doing it. It wasn't just this cool thing that you could do. And it started to go from a nice to have to a need to have. And people ask me, they say, how did you know that was going to happen? And I said, well, I didn't know. I felt like podcasting was something that was going to work for businesses. I couldn't see how it couldn't work, but I didn't know that I was in the same moment that I was in. I thought I was going to be able to make a decent little living here, but I didn't know the industry was going to explode the way it did. And so, firms everywhere started having them. And when I talked to firms about why they should have one, it's a much easier conversation. They're a little primed now, but the big ones are speaking directly to prospects. Is your prospects have questions? They want to they have a certain thing they want to know. And for the most part, lawyers know exactly what somebody who lands on their website wants to know. There's about 20, 30 questions minimum that everybody wants to know. Should I talk to the insurance company? Do I need, like, who pays for the doctor? Like, just a million different things. And this is an opportunity to make an episode that speaks directly to that question. That person presses play, they get an answer to their question, and they go, wow, I kind of like that person too. They established authority by answering the question. They know what they're talking about. They probably told me a little bit about a time they were here before and how that worked, because people show up with a problem. That's why they're on a lawyer's website. They have a problem. Let's say it's personal injury. Something bad happened to them or someone they love, and they want to feel better about that bad thing. And they show up to your website and you immediately give them the answers. You tell them that you've been here before, that you know what the path forward looks like. You're essentially telling them, give me your problem. And that's what they want to hear. They want to hear that you can solve that problem for them. And that's almost any form of marketing, no matter what the problem is. The problem is, I have dry grass. Okay, here's how our sprinkler system is going to take that problem away from you, right? We're just trying to solve their problem, speak to their pain point, let them know why we're the person to do it. And the voice, using your voice to do that, especially in a business where you're going to be working with someone closely like law, it's such a beautiful way to establish that kind of intimate connection really quickly. Because when they sit down across the table from you, or they get on the phone with you and you start talking, they already know your voice. Oh, I mean, what would you, that's almost, to get a conversion, there's so much power in them already having familiarity with you before you even speak to them. I could go on there, so feel free to pepper me with questions I didn't answer, but.
Well, I want to make sure that we have room for a quick story from you, because we're getting sort of near the end, but that's wonderful, because if it's just me here doing all the talking, then that's no good, right? You're the guy with the information, and I'm just kind of I'm just taking it all in, because there's a lot to think about and it's a lot of fun, and I love your passion here, Robert, and I can kind of get how maybe the path forward for a lot of these law firms who are just like you said, they need to spend money on marketing, but there needs to be a way for it to be easier, or maybe to like get a leg up on the competition, right? Like you mentioned, there's a barrier of entry. Well, there's many layers of barriers of entry for all of us. And if someone has that is looking for that personal injury attorney or something, then they're looking in for all these options, or maybe they're not even warmed up enough yet. They're looking for some of these answers to their questions, and so it seems like your kind of advice here is, if you're some sort of an attorney and you're an expert, and you said that there's like these 20 or 30 questions that prospects many times just are on your website looking for. And it seems like your kind of thought process is to answer these questions, but also package things together in sort of like almost like a storytelling format. Even when you were speaking with me, you were saying, well, there's some of these really specific one-off questions, but it's possible to kind of group similar questions together and kind of have a podcast episode about it, sort of tell the story. And then with you, there's this aspect of the marketing of the, like, making the idea come alive, right? Because it can be really straight and fact-based to say, here's this problem, here's my solution. But then you're saying, well, okay, sure, here I answered your problem, but then what about the bigger picture? And what about what's possible now? And what about if you finally have peace of mind to solve your legal problem, or you win your case, or you get your settlement, or whatever it is? And so it seems like, and then also all of this leads to the kind of pre-sold personality. And sometimes I've been there, and it's kind of spooky when you know someone from podcasting or from YouTubing, and then you meet them in real life, or you know them from social media, they're a friend of a friend, you meet them in real life, you meet them at a conference, and it's weird. It's kind of spooky. Where like it's like meeting a celebrity, or meeting like someone you hear on the radio, right? You kind of know them already, and you're already that much more warmed up. And it's like that it's an amazing idea and it's an amazing time to be alive because, as you said, there's no barrier to podcasting except for all these excuses for not doing it. And if these law firms can podcast, then they can grow their reach and expand their following and get people sort of warmed up already. So that way, when it comes time to make that phone call, have the conversation, they already sort of know, like, and trust you somewhat, and some of their questions are already answered. And it just seems like a smoother process for everyone involved. And so we're kind of approaching near the end here, but I want to make sure we have time to fit in like a quick story, like a success story or client case study, just to really show you off and demonstrate the skill and the transformation that your company provides. So what comes to mind as far as like a quick kind of before and after story?
Man, I've got so many. It's been incredible. But one that I really appreciate is I have a large client. I mean, one of the biggest firms in the world, and they were apprehensive about getting into this. They are an old storied firm, conservative in their marketing. And this is for them, I mean, this is bleeding edge to do something like this. But they had a new partner that was really committed to doing this. And they shopped around looking for partners. We were fortunate enough to have our name in the ring. And after a few conversations, they felt comfortable with us. They went with us, and it kicked off really well. We started the project. We got in there with them. We made them feel comfortable about what they were doing, and they started having fun with it. They started making episodes. But what I don't think the firm expected was they started getting clients from listeners. Listeners were listening, they were learning, and they had these unique problems that the podcast was about. And a client for this firm is not a throwaway. This is a long-term, big engagement. And at this point in time, we have a bunch of shows with this same firm now. And across the different shows, they're getting clients. And we have a good relationship with them because we do good work and we're very easy to work with. And I think we're just fun people in general. That's how we build our team. So I think they'd like us already, but the value exchange between what they're getting and just the value exchange in general is they feel like they're getting such value out of this relationship, which is what you want always. When you're selling something to someone, you always want them to feel like they got more than they gave. And that's such a beautiful feeling to me, is they're so happy with the product. They're so happy with the way it works, and they're getting so much out of it that they didn't expect to get. But I see that same type of thing happen in smaller firms too, where they have these clients who have these specific points. We work with a lot of injury lawyers, and someone will come in and they'll tell them they listened to the podcast and something bad happened like that day. And they had a question, they listened, and then they were so worried about this one thing that they didn't understand. And they said, and you just explained it to me, and I understood. I felt better. Just like I felt better, and I needed to feel better because I didn't know what was going to happen. And that's beautiful. And it's so hard to do that in any other way. You know, you can make videos, which I love videos. I think they're amazing, but so many people struggle with the video because the camera turns on and the lights, and they go, and they put on their video voice, and it's so hard to communicate that way. And then the written word, who's reading that? It's so hard to get people to read anymore, which is fine. But the ability to let them press play and then go do whatever they're doing. You know, podcasts sell you time. They don't say stop. They say, go, I'll come with you. And I think that's that's the reason why they've blown up. That's the reason why they're working so well for marketing. And that's the reason law firms are using them more and more, because they're such a tool to connect, communicate, and convert prospects.
I love it. Connect, communicate, and convert. And I'm like that way all the time. Like, I'll get in the car, I'll go for a walk, I'll be doing things around the house, and I'll put in a podcast, or I'll put in like a long form YouTube and not even have the video portion of it, and just be kind of taking it in, because what's the alternative? To hear reality TV in the other room, or to put on the radio and hear the same 5 songs I've been hearing for the past 25 years. And it's good just to like take in some kind of information. And you're so right that sometimes if you and there's people like this, like you and me, who are just like we listen and we always have this information coming in, and sometimes it's just exactly the right timing. We were listening to that such and such law podcast, and we finally got clarity on something, or we just knew we had to take action right then, and we already knew the person because they're one of the few lawyers that we were aware of that were doing podcasting, that were putting out this content on a regular basis. And then you and I know that that's huge too, is by having a team and by having kind of this sort of mentor type company to help you out, you can actually put out the content regularly and put it out consistently and put out the right kind of stuff versus trying to do it yourself, which ends up getting frustrated, just like how you get frustrated with making the video and writing all the blogs and things like that. And so podcasting is the way forward. And for those sorts of law firms that really can tap into it, they can rise above everyone else, and they can just enjoy a lot of these benefits, get clients and get listeners. And so how can someone pursue this? If someone says, okay, well, I know that I need a podcast from my law firm, or I've thought about it and it's finally time to pull the trigger, how does someone know if they are an ideal client of yours? And how do they take the next step by contacting LawPods?
I mean, for me, if you're going to do a podcast, it needs to be an initiative that you're going to commit to. Ultimately, it's something that you've decided that you have the budget for, that you have the time for. And for a law firm that's going to be interested in working with us, it is somebody who has to be committed, who has to have budget for it, and isn't just looking to dip their toes in the water, because almost any marketing initiative isn't a dip your toes in the water type of thing. That's really just, you're just kind of throwing money in the air if you're dipping your toes into an initiative. But if you're going to do it well and do it consistently, because it's such an amazing form of marketing, because it isn't just your voice. Like right now, you and I are having a conversation, our webcams are on. We're recording the video. And so we record that audio and we put it on a podcast player, record that video. Now we can put that on YouTube, but we can take that video and clip it up into those like little moments that we said something good, share those on social media. And we can also transcribe it. We can make a blog post from it. It's so much. But commit to it. Think about what you're doing and commit to it. And if you want to do it, I would urge you not to think that you should DIY it yourself. Either bring somebody in, hire somebody to help you do it, or work with an agency to do it. Obviously, I'd love to chat if it's something that you think is a good fit for us, and we're happy to help. But I would urge you practice law, because having been a lawyer who started a podcast at his law firm, and that's how this whole thing got started, it's a lot of work to do it really well, and you might find yourself in a different career if you're not careful. So I just urge you to look somewhere, get some help with it, and commit to this, because it's going to pay dividends with your ability to connect, communicate, and convert.
I love it. And you're so right, Robert. And so I love what you said there about how the podcasting can kind of be the hub for your content. And it's not just kind of a little dabbling thing. It's not just a hobby. You can record these podcast episodes, cut them up, use them for social content, and use them in all these different ways where it's something that grows your business and is not a distraction from your business. And you're reminding me that, like, I have a buddy who is an accountant, a CPA, and he loves doing podcasting. And it's a similar line of thinking, right? Where there's hundreds of little tidbit of questions that can be kind of answered in like different ways, or maybe someone asks in different ways. Like I saw this clip of you a few minutes ago where you said, like, you get asked the same 30 or 40 questions, but then there's kind of different angles. And it's like, well, you're asking me the same question, but different people phrase it differently. And then there's this whole thing to think about of SEO, search engine optimization, where people put in they have the same questions, but they phrase it differently and put these different phrases into the Googles and the YouTubes and the social media. And if you just kind of have this content where you really know your business really well, and you really know these fundamentals and these common questions, then you can catch all of these people that are asking about these similar problems, but phrased differently, just because you were sort of prolific and specific about it. And so this is all wonderful to think about. And so if this if this sounds like you and this is the next step that you want to take, then you should contact Robert Ingalls at LawPods. And so is the logical next step just lawpods.com, or where should someone go?
Yeah, I mean, really, if you type LawPods anywhere, you're going to find us. That was very much by design. But lawpods.com, you can check us out there, see some of the work we've done, and set an appointment if you want to chat.
Wonderful. And I cannot forget Law Pods now, right? Because it's on your hat, it's on your wall. I've seen clips of you with like the fuzzy vest with like the Law Pods
Oh yeah.
on the logo. Like you're very well branded. So it's like burned into our mind now when you search it anywhere on any of these platforms. Law Pods, Robert Ingalls. It's even on the mug. See, I mean, it's maybe it's
Always
on
be
like
branding.
it's on like the pen or on underwear or who the heck even knows. And so this is definitely something that you should do to turn your firm podcast into a content marketing machine. So go and search LawPods and talk to Robert and his team and take the next step, and you're going to love it. And so as we wind down and wrap up our conversation here, Robert, I would really like to end on like a soundbite, right? Because we're cutting up the podcast content using different ways. And so it's always fun to just jump into like a quote or lesson that can either tie into like your entrepreneurial journey or advice you wish you'd gotten or just something specific to law firms. But what just floats to the surface when I ask you about a quote or lesson that you would just love to share at the end here?
And there's something that I keep beside my desk and I have for years, and it's an entrepreneurial quote. And it says, I'm not going to look up at it, it's over there, but it says, "The cowards never started, and the weak died along the way." And I think about that all the time, not just because it's beside my desk, but because it's just in me. Is never stop, never stop. That's the real thing that divides the people that do from the people that don't. Is the people that don't make excuses. And they say, well, that was hard. Well, because of X, Y, and Z, because of this, because of the market, because I couldn't get new clients, because clients are stupid, whatever. No excuses. Like let's go to Wedding Crashers for another one. No excuses. Play like a champion. It doesn't matter. Like you have to move. You have to keep moving forward. And yeah, you're going to hit setbacks. You're going to waste money. You're going to have problems. But what divides the people that do from the people that don't is who decides not to give up. And because I mean, I'm the book. My first book is going to be titled "Least Likely to Succeed," because there's zero reason I should be here. Like there's zero reason I should have been a lawyer. If you were to ask my classmates from middle school and high school, the ones who don't know where I am right now, they would say, "Oh, he's nowhere," because I was headed nowhere. I had to make the decision every day to just like say, I want more than that. And to me, that I see it every day. I go to conferences with entrepreneurs who have a very similar story of they just had to have more and they did what it took to get it. So just never stop.